The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is July 29th, 2014. Tonight, for the next 2 hours, I am joined not by a guest. I don't want to call him a guest. I would say like a guest co-host. It's not so much an interview. It's more so two intelligent individuals that are friends sitting down having an enlightened conversation about important topics. And that would be my good friend Brandon Turbeville. Brandon, welcome back to the broadcast, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming back on and sharing your analysis with the audience. I know my listeners, I know you have your own radio show and you have your own flock of listeners, so to speak, but I know my listeners really appreciate your analysis on things. And actually, since the last time you were on, I actually read one of your articles pertaining to one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, which we might as well just hop right into it. We're going to start off with the whole MH-17 shoot down Russia and the Ukraine. And we're going to spend some time on what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine, because a lot of what's going on in the East Ukraine, these people being bombed and hit, I see it being blocked in the media by what's going on in Gaza. Now, that doesn't mean what's happening to the Palestinians is any less horrific than what's going on to the people in Ukraine. It's just, you know how the media is. They'll get you to focus on one thing and not focus on another. So I have been beating the drums about Gaza and Israel for like 2 weeks. I want to focus a little bit on what's going on in Ukraine with Russia and them, and because that's going on constantly. While you hear the Obama administration, them people making a big deal out about John Kerry's treatment by Israel, they slip it under the radar that, oh, by the way, we're putting more sanctions on Russia, even more. Sanctions are an act of war, just so people understand. Okay, it might be low level, but it's still an act of war, and that in the past that has caused other conflicts that we've gotten into where it went from being sanctions to bullet throwing at one another. So let's just keep that in mind. So, Brandon, focusing on the MH-17 shoot down to begin with, you wrote an incredibly awesome article about it. 6 reasons why you shouldn't believe the official story, or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact title. I read it on air, word for word, beginning to end last week on the show when I was talking about the MH-17 shoot down. I should say the week before. And I read it word for word, the entire article from beginning to end, and it was really well written. So let's discuss that first. And since you've written that article, would you say there's more than just 6 red flags or 6 things to look at now? In the time period between now and when you wrote that, has anything else popped up about this whole shoot down that you find shady?
Yeah, there's been a number of issues that have popped up since then, and mainly that is pertaining to not only the evidence which the State Department, the U.S. State Department, purports to have, but doesn't, and also some of the evidence that's come out from some of the flight aviation employees in Ukraine who have seen some things in the behavior of Ukrainian flight aviation crews and staff, as well as some of the information that came out from the Russians. Now, I guess we should just kind of take this from the top and maybe go back to the 6 Reasons articles and look at what surrounds this as a basis. And largely it has been decided that this plane was shot down and that it was brought down by a missile system. And so one of the questions is, what type of missile system and who had it? And immediately the Western media and Western governments, NATO governments, pointed the fingers at Russia and the Russian-backed separatists. Now, there is no doubt that Russia does support these separatists, and they support them in a manner which is beyond what Putin states and what the Russian government states. But the idea that they had missiles that were powerful enough and had the capability to reach far enough away to shoot this plane, which was flying at 33,000 feet, interesting number of feet. But the idea that they had these missiles that were capable of that is just, it's kind of hard to believe. What the Ukrainian separatists generally have are what's called the Igla missile systems. And this is kind of a shoulder-fired missile, and it can hit planes. It generally hits helicopters and low-flying jet aircraft, bombers and so forth. Not planes which are flying at 33,000 feet. This is simply too high of an altitude for these shoulder-fired missiles to reach. What could have brought the plane down, and what's been settled on in much of the media, is this Buke missile system. And I don't know, some people call it Buke, some people call it Buck. I don't know, I've been calling it Buke, so we'll go with that. And this is, the question is, did the separatists have the Buke missile systems? Well, that's up in the air. We know Russia does have Buke missile systems, and we also know Ukraine has Buke missile systems. Now, the question of whether or not the rebels have Buke missile systems, that's somewhat murkier. We actually do have a report. At the time I wrote the article that you mentioned, this report was not circulated, but it came out shortly thereafter, that there was a report out of Voice of Russia, which is a major Russian media outlet, that stated about 2 months ago, or in June, I believe it was, the Donetsk separatists had captured a military base that had Buke missile systems in it, and that they now had these Buke missile systems in their possession. This media report was about 3 paragraphs long, containing maybe 2 sentences apiece, and it was one media report, Voice of Russia. Now, if you'll look back and see how Russian media reports are treated in the Western media, when it says, when Russian media says the Ghouta chemical weapons attack in Syria was actually conducted by the rebels, the U.S. State Department says, oh no, Russian media can't be trusted, they're not credible, that's propaganda. When Russian media says that there's been an atrocity perpetrated in eastern Ukraine by the Kiev forces, then Western outlets say, no, Russian media is not credible, that's propaganda. But when one report appears in Voice of Russia, 3 paragraphs long, saying that Donetsk rebels have Buke missile systems, then suddenly it's proof. It's undeniable proof that the rebels have Buke missile systems. Well, question with that is, if we're going to take single Russian media reports as undeniable fact, well, I have one of my own, and it comes from Itar Tass, which is another huge Russian media outlet, which also describes the fact that shortly before, in fact, not shortly before, the day before the MH-17 was brought down, the Kiev forces moved their Buk missile systems into Donetsk the day before the plane was shot down. Now, the question, of course, is why. Now, Russia's not flying jets over that region. The separatists don't even have jets. So why are we moving a missile system, an anti-aircraft missile system, into Donetsk the day before the plane is being brought down? So we want to play the game of Russian media reports. We have numerous media reports to play with. Now, again, so let's give them the fact that we have all of these groups: Russia, Ukraine, the Kiev government, and the separatists who have the potential to have these Buk missile systems, and two of these groups do have Buk missile systems. You have to look at why the plane was over that area to begin with. Now, we have clear reports that there was a Federal Aviation Administration order that prohibited American pilots and airlines and charter flights and pretty much anybody who flew aircraft from flying over this region of Ukraine. And that came out almost 3 months ago, and I linked to that in my article. Now, it's almost unbelievable to suggest that the FAA has an order prohibiting flight over this area, but other flight administration, aviation administrations don't. That's not believable. And of course, we have the timing of the event. We have the event came a day after the Ukrainian military claimed that Russia shot down a Ukrainian jet fighter over Ukrainian territory. That's still up in the air. It's possible, but up in the air. Came a few days after the Western media just started propagandizing that the Russian government was considering targeted strikes inside Ukraine, and we can talk about that too, because that's somewhat propaganda as well. And it came just a few hours after the U.S. issued more sanctions against Russia, and these sanctions have been coming. Now, to go further into this, in terms of the plane which was brought down, flying at 33,000 feet over this war zone, there is ample evidence that the plane was actually directed to fly off course by the Kiev Flight Administration, the aviation controllers, flight controllers, that it was directed off the path. Also, there's evidence that it was directed to lower its altitude, right? There's evidence that it was escorted by Kiev jets. In fact, we have a report from eTurbo News, which is sort of a website that deals with all things aviation, right? They report stocks on flight companies and flight groups. They report weather at airports. I mean, it's the Aviation Hub website. And they had a report coming from an air traffic controller in Ukraine. Now, the controller is a Spanish citizen, and he was working in Ukraine as an air traffic controller. And he said that immediately after the Malaysian plane was shot down over eastern Ukraine, that the Ukrainian air traffic controllers came in and security services came in, and they immediately removed the flight data. They seized the flight data and left with it, and we haven't seen it since. So according to him, the Ukrainian military was involved, and that they heard that the Ukrainian military was involved over the radio and through the reports over the radio and in the flight controller's room. So all of this comes together, and then of course we got to look at the evidence that's provided by the other governments. We have evidence by Kiev, which is virtually non-existent. It's working in concert with the U.S., and we'll get that in a minute. But the Russian government has provided radar data, It's provided photographic evidence. It's provided detailed data of the location of the plane. It's provided all this stuff for the world to see. And what has the United States or Kiev produced? Nothing. They produced Twitter. They produce YouTube. They produce Facebook. I'm sorry, this doesn't cut it when you're talking about international politics and the potential start for World War III. Facebook and Twitter is not where you base your research. Now, we have reports that there was a Ukrainian separatist leader who tweeted that they had brought down the plane shortly after the MH-17 crashed. And there's a number of problems with this. We're going to look at the propaganda, right? The tweet. So the plane goes down, and there's a tweet that comes up on this Ukrainian separatist leader's Twitter account, and it says that we just brought a plane down over this region. Well, it turns out, that he never said that it was MH-17. They never said it was a passenger jet. In fact, the tweet said it was, I think, an AN-26, which is a cargo jet that's used by the Kiev military. So apparently whoever tweeted this was under the impression that they had brought down a cargo jet. And second, it wasn't the Ukrainian separatist leader's Twitter account. It was a fan page. And that tweet was later taken down. The funny thing about separatist leaders, at least in East Ukraine, they generally don't have time to play on Twitter. They don't have time to tweet their food or what they've just done. They're generally involved in actually leading separatist battles and so forth. So then we have a video that's emerged that's allegedly between a Russian commander and a Ukrainian separatist commander, and they're talking about bringing the plane down, right? But problem with this, and this is something that Marie Barf, I guess we could call her, has repeatedly discussed in her press conferences before it became, just completely unbelievable to mention this stuff anymore. It was after experts looked at that video, they determined that it had been highly edited, that they had cut and pasted audio from about 3 different conversations and put it together to make it look like these guys were confessing to downing the MH-17 jet. So all of this, again, Russia's produced information. The United States and Kiev have produced absolutely nothing but vitriol and very weak propaganda, by the way. So I've seen a lot better propaganda from other operations.
That video was horrible. The pictures that they used, that they were like, look, you can tell it's this commander in the Ukrainian, these Russian-backed rebels that are fighting the Ukrainian army. You can see it. The picture that they used was like the picture of a Russian Spetsnaz guy with a face mask on, a ski mask on, and that picture has got to be at least like 6 to 8 years old. Like if you Google Russian Spetsnaz and on Google Images, that's one of the first images that comes up. It's this standard. He's sitting there in full camis, and he's got a black ski mask on his face. And they're passing this off. I mean, that's like almost meme quality stuff, Brandon. And they're passing this off like it's, look, evidence. Dude, a 5th grader could have done a better presentation than that. Who the hell put this video together? And the State Department's like, yeah, it's real. We should have World War III over Twitter and Facebook posts, which we can't verify.
Yeah, that's it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic, right? These Kiev fascists, they're too smart by half, right? They got it halfway. They got a good false flag going, but they could only do it halfway. And I forgot to mention the fact that we also heard that we had video evidence of Buk missile systems being moved back across the Russian border. That video, again, turned out that it was not being moved across the Russian border. In fact, it wasn't even near Russia. It was in the Kiev government's own territory. So it was actually proof that the Kiev government had these missiles as well. Again, I've seen a lot better propaganda in many different operations. This was very poor. And but we still get vitriol, and the propaganda that we get in the media now, I mean, I read reports earlier this morning, and I think it was in Bloomberg, where it referred to the fact that Russian separatists had downed the MH-17 jet as if it were fact, right? This is infantile. But unfortunately, you have a general public that reacts to infantile propaganda in a way that it works. I mean, we sit here and you and I can make fun of this narrative, but unfortunately, it's worked. I have people coming up to me and telling me that Putin is the next Hitler, and that this is exactly what Hitler did, and that we can't appease Putin. This is outrageous.
I've had the same conversations. I had somebody actually mention the video that you brought up, and I was going to actually bring that up. So you're on the same wavelength with me. That as evidence that look, there's video evidence that's been released, okay, of these Russian-backed rebels with these Russian systems, and I'm like, the Ukrainian military has Russian equipment, and then people look at me like, no, they don't. Yes, they do. Where do you think they got their military equipment from, geniuses? So you can't just say because you looked at a piece of equipment and go, oh, that's Russian military. No, you can't tell that. You have to see who is actually manning the equipment. And then when they show that video, I'm like, why would the Russian separatists drive a piece of artillery through a town where someone's going to have a video of it? Like, why would they do that? And I'm like, I don't really see any separatists hanging on that thing. It seems more AJ squared away. It almost looks like the military. To me, that would be proof that the Ukrainian military actually has the Buke missile system. But hey, it's got to be the rebels because Fox News and CNN told you so.
Yeah, and going by that logic that because it's Russian military equipment, then it must be the Russian military. Why don't we jet over to Syria and Iraq, and we can look at ISIS that is driving U.S. military Humvees and actually has U.S. military helicopters. They have U.S. military tanks and U.S. military weapons. Does that mean that that's the United States? Well, in that case, actually, it would be. But let's follow that logic all the way. But people have no concept of this, unfortunately. And again, this was where this video was taken. This was Kiev-held territory. Nobody's crossing any borders here. These things are just riding around in Kiev military.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
The Russians drove it across the border. Really? Really? They just, screw it. We're going to drive the missile system across the border. There's no satellites in outer space watching us over at the NSA, over at Langley, the CIA. No, they're not watching anything. JSOC's not paying attention to what we're doing. No one's looking. We'll just drive our missiles. Really? Because, Popeye, Russia's dumb because they're Russia, and they're communists, You're in the wrong century, first of all, and you really need to pay attention to reality. Like, you're unplugged. Yeah, I saw a poll that like one out of every 10 Americans is willing to go to war with Russia over this. Like, you people are a joke. Really, you're a joke as humans because you're just so pathetically dumbed down and indoctrinated. And I'm not throwing ad hominem attacks. It's just it's getting to the point where, come on. I mean, Putin is the next Hitler. I love that meme. He's the next Hitler. Actually, there are fascist neo-Nazis in control right now who are bombing people. I love the one picture. I don't know who showed it. I can't remember if it was CNN or MSNBC, but they showed this picture of this lady in front of her house, and she's all banged up. She's, if I remember correctly, she was hugging somebody or holding something in the picture. And behind her, you can see it's all houses in like very rural area. These houses don't even have paint on them, Brandon. And this is the area that they're bombing. And they titled it, our media was like, "Woman cries outside of terrorist headquarters in Ukraine." And I'm like, really? Like, or rebel terrorist or something like that, or separatist terrorist or whatever. They equated it to terrorism. And it's this woman standing outside of this farmhouse that was just bombed by the Ukrainian military, which are real fascists, real neo-Nazis. But hey, Putin's the Nazi, but we're actually backing real neo-Nazis. But don't pay attention to that.
Yeah, and this is something that's undeniable, right? This is not that we're just insulting them by calling them fascist or we don't like the way they're running the government. These people are actually neo-Nazis. Their hero is Stefan Bandera, who fought for Hitler. I mean, he fought for the communists too, but he fought for Hitler and helped massacre a number of Ukrainian Jews. So this is their hero, right? The leader of the Svoboda party. I think his name is Chanibok, right? He's given all kinds of Nazi speeches. And of course, Jarosz, I think, who is dead now, I think he was assassinated recently, of right sector, Pravi sector, right? These are Nazis. These are fascist and Nazis. There's no other way to put it. They've got symbols that are I forget the German word. I think it's the Reichsengel, right? But it's like the swastika, too. They've got that as well. So no doubt that these are actual fascists. And then to use the propaganda meme against Putin and say that he's the next Hitler. I've also heard that the communist narrative is being brought up as well, that Putin was a member of KGB, and I'm no fan of Putin, by the way.
Yeah, but look, if we're going to start calling people communists, really, all you got to do is look to our own country. I mean, we've reversed roles. Russia is like America was in the 80s, and America is like the Soviet Union. Of course, I remember talking to Charlotte Iserby about this, and there was a whole deal that was signed with Reagan and Gorbachev back in the day, and oh yeah, Glasnost, and oh, Mr. Gorbachev, oh, tear down that wall, oh, isn't that nice for public and for audio clips, but wow, nobody really knows the truth. Brandon, I'm going to cut us off because the break is sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. 3 short minutes, and Brandon and I will be right back. More on Ukraine, MH-17, Russia, and more. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. If you hear Monster snoring in the background at all tonight, she is extra loud tonight, and she is right underneath my chair, and I could not get her to move during the break if I wanted to. She is cemented in place, firmly hanging out in my my little puppy co-host spot here. So if you hear her snoring in the background, as always, I always tell you, it's not me making any weird noises. That's Monster sounding like a little chainsaw in the background. Anyway, during the break, Brandon and I were getting into, just as always happens when you have a great guest on, or even just a round table. And we talk about this all the time, how the conversations during the breaks are just as enlightening as they are during the live show. And anybody that's ever done radio knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I jotted down really quick what we were talking about. Just one of the things I wanted to focus on, and why there's a lot of shadiness to this. And it was the question of, why did the plane fly over an active war zone? And there's so many aspects to that, because people could say, well, the pilot got veered off course. And like we said, you get veered off. Usually when a plane veers off course, no matter what civilized country it's flying over, they usually have a fighter escort up its rear end very quickly. And it's not just the United States that would happen, and especially if you're flying over a war zone, you would expect that there to be a fighter escort. But the Ukraine government is, whoever's in charge in Kiev, obviously, is in control of their version of the FAA, who's in control of their air control towers. So who gave the order to the pilot to change course? Was it the Ukrainian air traffic controller? If it was, well, then the Ukrainian air traffic controller, who told them to tell the pilot to change course? Because all you have to do is have somebody come up into the air traffic control tower and say, tell flight MH-17 to divert to, such and such coordinates, and then they say, okay, and then they say, flight 17, this is tower. Go ahead, tower. Okay, redirect to blah, 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 blah. And they set all their coordinates on the computer, and then the plane automatically, starts to change course. That's how they do it, right? So, there's more to it than the pilot just flying the plane, right, Brandon, with it, holding the yoke in his hand. It's not like Airplane, the movie. They have to dial in all this stuff on the computers and stuff. So that's a big deal. Who gave that order? The pilot doesn't just make that decision himself, like, hey, Brandon, let's fly the plane over an active war zone. Screw it. I'm feeling lucky tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, like I said, that's one of the major questions, because this plane, it was radically off course, right? It flew out of its way to go over the war zone, and it lowered its altitude from where it was. So again, there's evidence coming out from some of the statements that were made from individuals who worked in the Kiev air traffic control, who said that this plane was directed to change its course and to lower its altitude. And there is also evidence that there was, in fact, a jet escort, a Ukrainian jet escort. 2 jets followed this plane until 3 minutes before it crashed. So this actually led a lot of people to believe that perhaps that a Ukrainian jet shot it down. But these are questions which we still don't quite know the answer to. But regardless, it wasn't the Russian air traffic control that would have directed this plane to go off course. It would obviously had to be the Kiev air traffic controlling office. And as you said, whoever made this decision to draw this plane radically off course has a lot of answers. We have a lot of questions for them, and whoever told them. And if no one told them, then fine. We want to know why they told this flight to be diverted. Now, just an interesting side note: the very next day, or maybe 2 days after, another Malaysian flight got diverted over Syria and flew over Syria, which is another war zone. So what's going on with the Malaysian flights? And this is now the second Malaysian flight that's disappeared and or crashed. Remember, we had, I think it was over the Indian Ocean. We had a Malaysian flight that just disappeared. That was the big talk of the Western media. I don't know what it was like around the rest of the world, but obviously here it was the thing that everyone was talking about day in and day out. It's the thing they gave us to chew on for a while they did something else. So yeah, again, the question too of qui bono, and this is who benefits, and this has been made fun of in recent Western press, by the way. I saw an article coming out of, I think maybe one of these left liberal magazines they were saying one of the famous statements of conspiracy theorists is to say, qui bono, who benefits? And unfortunately, you don't get good research answers from asking that question. Like, really? You don't? Because I was under the impression that if you don't ask that question, you were destined to miss out on who the guilty culprit is here for these types of act. You have to ask who benefits. It's called a motive.
You have to look at this like an investigator would look at a crime. And that's one of the things that an investigator is going to ask when investigating a crime. Oh, look, Brandon, you and I are cops. Let's say we're detectives. We're homicide detectives, right? Oh, look, we found a dead body. Well, why was this guy stabbed 57 times in the chest and the head and the neck and the upper torso? Who would benefit from his death? Isn't that one of the very first questions we would be asking ourselves? So why is it normal for a police officer in an everyday investigation, maybe we're investigating a series of burglaries. Hey, Brendan, who would benefit from breaking into these houses? How about mail fraud? Who would benefit from committing the mail fraud? How about insurance scams? Who would benefit from committing the insurance scam? Why is that not valuable when looking at what the government does, or an event like this, like where something crashes or is shot down or disappears? Why is it not valid? Because that's conspiracy theorists look at that. No, sir, that's a fallacy. You're committing so many fallacies, it's not even funny. Okay, but let's stick to the point. It's propaganda. It's lies. I would love to debate the writers of these articles, like online in a conversation, live. Let them tell me the same thing to my face. And I would be like, no, wrong. Logical fallacy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Here's what you did wrong and why you did it. And they wouldn't be able to hold up to that. I mean, that's not a valid point. It's not. It's a totally invalid argument to come at anyone and say, well, if you conspiracy theorists like to say that. No, So do homicide detectives and anybody investigating any type of incident, you idiot. I mean, that's like common sense 101. So to attack that, see, you can see what that is, Brandon. That's trying to create the narrative itself.
Yeah, and it's essentially arguing that the motive doesn't matter in a crime, right? And which is absolutely insane. This is not the way any kind of investigation is undertaken. But so you have to ask that question: who would benefit from this? And you would look at, for instance, the separatists. How would they benefit from shooting an airliner down, a passenger jet? How would the Russians benefit from shooting a passenger jet down? I mean, what would they have to gain? There aren't. I mean, I understand that there were AIDS researchers on the plane and so forth, but they're, in the grand scale of geopolitics, they were not important people on there.
No, actually, they would stand to lose more
Exactly.
than they gain, because look at how mad the world is already at them, and they don't really know, and the narrative's already being tweaked. And everybody's like, oh, F the Russians, they shot the plane down and they killed those kids and all the people that were on board, and there was just innocent people. Why that wasn't a military target? Why would they do that? Oh my God, it was these Russian-backed separatists, and the Russians are shelling into Ukraine now. The government's go, we should go to war with Russia. We should just go to war with Russia and kill all the Russians because, oh my God, they're bad, and we're America. We're the world's police. I mean, that's literally what you see going on here. That's what this is. You know, who would benefit from shooting the plane down? The Ukrainians and NATO. That's who would benefit. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly, because it's a false flag operation. And look at who got blamed for it. I mean, before the plane stopped smoldering, the fingers were pointed at Russia.
I want to know how they have satellite photos of the missile going after this plane, and we've got satellite photos. You can see Russian artillery lobbing shells, and then there's craters, so that obviously means that they're shooting. We've already got all this evidence. I have a question. You guys still haven't found MH-17. Okay, you have no idea where the hell that thing is. All sorts of satellites floating around out in outer space. No one has a clue, quote unquote, where that went, right? But you've got all this evidence, so which is it? Either you have the satellites out there that can get all this stuff that quickly, and you don't know, and you know where the plane is, and you're just lying and hiding, or these images are made up, and maybe your capabilities aren't that great. Now, I personally think that the first one was shot down accidentally, perhaps in war games, over by the South China Sea there, and who knows? I think it was, if anything, the most plausible thing is it was shot down back, maybe by accident, and they're trying to just cover their asses about it. The first one, the second one here, again, who benefits? The Ukrainian government, the current Ukrainian government, not the people, but the fascist people that committed a coup 5-6 months ago now, a Western-backed coup, and took over. By the way, we're actually backing Nazis. I could not stress this. This isn't an ad hominem attack. This isn't me being like, that guy's a Nazi. No, they're literally Nazis. They are neo-Nazis. They are fascists. They sport the swastika. They walk around, basically, pretty much it's like, the Nazi Party 2.0 here in 2014, a junior version of it. And we're like, oh, no, stop it. Putin's being the one that's being like Hitler. I mean, come on, dude. We need to realize what's going on. They're actually taking what they're doing. They're taking the people that they're backing, and they're taking their evil and they're projecting it onto Putin, and people are believing it. And don't get me wrong, Pooty Poot ain't an angel, and I don't think that Russia is, are you taking their side? No, I'm trying to stop World War III. We don't need to be picking a fight with Russia, because then China and Iran are going to get on their side. Well, F China. Oh, well, China holds all of our debt. So how would we fund the war against China and Russia and Iran? Who would we borrow the money from? The Rothschild clan? Oh, so we can go into more debt, right? This is insane. We're chasing our own tail. Why do we want to? We don't, trust me, our military can't handle a war with Russia. And a lot of people have said, well, the American military is pretty strong, and the Russian military, they're still building themselves back up. The Russian military hasn't been at war for 12 years. Okay, just remember that. Our military is very worn right now. And to think that we can go head to head with the Russians, the Chinese, and perhaps the Iranians and a couple other people that might hop on board versus us is just insane. It's just we need to take a step back and look at this. Anyway, I got a little long-winded there, but my original comment was, hey, they have all these pictures, but they can't find MH-370, so whatever.
Yeah, well, I think I may be able to solve the mystery of where MH-370 actually is. I think it's in Iraq, next to the weapons of mass destruction. So when anytime we are presented with grainy photo evidence and lines about, we have evidence that this is where who shot the missiles and where these weapons stashes are and so forth, always remember Colin Powell going before the UN with his evidence of weapons of mass destruction.
Or the incubator babies.
Yes, don't forget the incubator babies.
Wasn't she an ambassador? She was an ambassador's kid, right?
Yeah, she was the ambassador's daughter.
Yeah, but that's not a setup. And they admitted that was a lie later on. They throw the babies out of the incubators. Yeah.
At least it was creative. It was better than what we have today. In terms of who benefits, one other thing that they try to exonerate the Russians here is the idea that some radical shooting down of a jet airline or whatever that would cause to begin with. I mean, whatever purpose that would serve to begin with, it's not necessary. Putin, all time is on his side in terms of the battle against the Western Ukrainian fascists, right? Remember when Poroshenko took office, he agreed to accept the IMF terms and conditions. He agreed to accept the chicken feed coming from the IMF in exchange for austerity measures. And this was agreed with Syniuk as well, the prime minister who just resigned. So austerity measures are coming, and they're going to dramatically increase the price of gas, of heating oil and gas in Ukraine, which is extremely important in Ukraine. It's cold. It's going to remove subsidies on that gas and oil. It's going to turn over a lot of that black earth rich farmland that they have in Ukraine over to big private corporations. It's going to turn over some of the quite impressive industrial factories and so forth over to the big private corporations. I think Rohr company in Germany, and some of the international oil companies are going to snatch up the oil deposits. And who's going to pay for this, of course, is the people at the bottom, as they always do. While the major corporations snatch up all of the wealth, the national wealth of the people, of the public, the actual public suffers under austerity measures, and their social safety net programs, what were left of that, are going to be slashed. This is austerity on the way for Ukraine, which was already in a very pitiful economic shape. So if all Putin has to do is continue to arm the separatist rebels with light arms, a few shoulder-fired missiles, some military instruction, and wait until the austerity measures hit in western Ukraine, and you're going to have a very unhappy Western Ukrainian population with the Kiev government soon enough. So all he has to do is hold his territory, and this will sort of fall apart on its own. Why would Russia shoot down a passenger jet? Why would they do that anyway? It's ridiculous. So, this is
because they're Russians, and don't you know they're crazy? They're not like us, Brandon. That's why we need to go to war with them. My God, man.
Yeah, I know, and maybe Americans will finally understand that war is a two-way street. It's not just something we do to other people while we sit on the couch and eat snack chips and watch television, flip the channel when it comes on. A fight with the Russians is not something that we, the Russians, or anybody else in the world are really prepared for. We've got nukes, and so do they. And this is the potential for World War III. In fact, I mentioned to you earlier that we have a bill that's been submitted to Congress. It's called the Russian Aggression Prevention Act. It's Senate Bill 2277, and it was submitted by Corker, who's a Republican who I think will be taking over as the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee very soon. And basically this bill is the initiation of even more provocation against Russia. We have, just to go through this here so people can get the idea of what I'm talking about, is there are about 3 different titles of this bill. And most of them, for instance, the first title is entitled Reinvigorating the NATO Alliance. And what it involves is what it calls strengthening the NATO alliance and the posture of U.S. forces in the European and Eurasian regions. In other words, it wants to harden the forces that we already have, NATO forces that we already have in Eastern Europe and in what's called Eurasia. And it also wants to go ahead and push forward the deployment of the anti-ballistic missile systems that we are putting right on the doorstep of Russia, that are aimed at Russia, that we want to pretend are to protect us against Iran, even though they're aimed at Russia. Again, this is something, by the way, for anybody who has any fantasies that Obama is somehow different than Bush. This was the same ABM system that caused so much friction between U.S. and Russia under the Bush administration, when Bush wanted to deploy these ABM missiles against Russia. So that section also wants to increase funding for Poland and some of the Baltic states, and increase cooperation between the U.S. and Germany on what they call global and European security issues. There's a second title of the bill, and this is called Deterring Further Russian Aggression in Europe. Of course, there isn't any Russian aggression in Europe. The entire Russian mission in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, by the way, is defensive in reaction to the color revolution that we initiated in Kiev, the Euromaidan, where we funded the Nazis and thugs to take power. But this second part of the bill, it would have more sanctions applied to Russia, basically Russian government officials, Russian business owners, that sort of thing, and it also provides for support for Russian democracy and civil society organizations. Now, that's code word to mean non-governmental organizations, color revolution organizations, things like the National Endowment for Democracy, the National Democratic Institute, the International Republican Institute, USAID, which Putin kicked out, by the way, because of this very reason. This, by the way, I don't know if I can say it on the network, but the female rock band in Russia that caused so much controversy over there for some of the things that they'd done.
Pussy Riot?
Yeah, we could say that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. Go ahead.
Oh, great. So this is what Pussy Riot is, a product of this color revolution NGO destabilization campaign against Russia. And this is, but they actually committed crimes, by the way. That's why they were in prison, not because they were naked women making crazy videos. They actually committed vandalism. That's why they went to jail. But the idea is that these are just tentacles of a wider color revolution apparatus that goes all the way from Eastern Europe to Russia and all the way into the Middle East. And actually, it's here in Europe and in the United States as well. So it provides for funding for that apparatus as well. And of course, the third part of that bill wants to basically put Ukraine, and this is probably the most dangerous part of the bill. It wants to put Ukraine on the NATO fast track. It wants to make Ukraine a special ally of the United States. Well, there are two important things about that. First, if you make Ukraine a NATO state, then any controversy essentially that arises between Russia and Ukraine is now not just between Russia and Ukraine, it's between Russia and NATO directly. And any provocation that's it's initiated by Ukraine and blamed on Russia. If it's found to be a provocation by Russia, if it's blamed on Russia and NATO accepts that as Russian initiation, then the ability to start a third world war with Russia is right there on the table. Russia does not want NATO up against its front door as the way Ukraine is now, and of course it's already stated that it will not accept NATO moving that far east. In fact, it wasn't supposed to move any further east than Germany, but that's
one of the chatters in the chat room just brought up a good point, and they said, how come we want to put rockets on Russia's border and nothing on our own? Like, we're so interested in protecting everybody else's borders, but ours, hey, leave the doors wide open.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Well, I want to mention one other thing about this NATO situation first, though. It's by making Ukraine a special U.S. ally. This is basically the back door, right? If we make Ukraine a special ally, and the United States rushes in as the sole protector of Ukraine and gets involved with Russia in some type of military organization, well, the United States is a NATO member. And an attack on a NATO member is an attack on all of NATO. Remember that. That's a back door to get NATO involved in this Russian confrontation. So I just wanted to point that out as the Russian Aggression Prevention Act. I don't know what chance it has of passing, given the climate. It's got as good a chance as any to pass. But yeah, again, as the commenter pointed out, We've got all this concern for national security. We have to be groped at airports. We have to have checkpoints out on the streets, and Border Patrol 100 miles inland doing checkpoints. But the actual borders, well, that's no problem. Just walk right in. Just the idea that we're actually concerned about national security is absurd. There is right now a propaganda effort to prepare the United States and the American people for a massive terror attack inside the United States. And I've talked about this before, and I don't know if we got around to this on your show the last time, but we are seeing pretty detailed reports coming out, statements coming out of people like Lindsey Graham, Dick Cheney. We've had a few others actually give specific cities that might have some type of nuclear device explode in them. And the idea is this is going to be blamed on ISIS or Syrian rebels coming back from Syria.
Yeah, it depends on who they're pissed at and who they want to start the war with. It could be the Russians, it could be ISIS, it's going to be whatever country, whoever they're trying to pick a fight with, that's who it would be blamed on. At least that's what my analysis is. I'm going to cut us off right there, Brandon. We got a break sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 short, quick minutes, and then Brandon and I will be right back. Check his website out, BrandonTurbeville.com. We will be right back. I'm going to make him plug all his stuff, Facebook, Twitter, and everything when we get back, so stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is July 29th, 2014. Hanging out with me tonight is my guest co-host. He's not a guest per se. He's more like a guest co-host, my good friend Brandon Turbeville. Brandon, before we get into it, you do your own radio show. So take 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. Plug, however long it takes. Plug your radio show, your Twitter, your Facebook, your website, how people can listen to your archived shows on your website, whatever. Go ahead and plug away because you deserve it. You do a lot of good work. Oh, and your stuff at Activist Post, too, because you're right there, too.
Yeah, thanks. If people want to keep up with my work, I write regularly for activistpost.com, and I also write occasionally for the antimedia.org. And I have a radio show over on ucy.tv called Truth on the Tracks. Now, it airs every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Friday night is actually the rebroadcast, but I talk about a lot of different things. I talk about the geopolitical aspects, some of the current events, and I even go into some of the historical analysis sometimes as well. So it's a new show every week, so I encourage people to check that out. And if you're interested in my work specifically, then just go to BrandonTurbeville.com, and that is the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the YouTube videos, the archive versions of my show, and all of the interviews and so forth that I do, as well as my books. I've got a few books out, and one of the ones that are most relevant to what we've been talking about tonight is The Road to Damascus, the Anglo-American Assault on Syria, where I just go through the recent history of the Syrian destabilization, the conflict in Syria, and explain where that came from and what's happening and who the real perpetrators are. So that's available at BrandonTurbeville.com as well.
Awesome. And that's got you links to your Twitter and your Facebook and all that stuff there too?
Yeah, Facebook is just Brandon Turbeville. So is Twitter. I don't use Twitter so much. I can't keep up with all the social media. So right now, you can add me as a friend on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. That's fine. But I can't keep up with so much social media.
No, I hear that. It's a full-time job just doing this in and of itself, and then doing a radio show and doing research, and then writing articles or paying attention and having to take time to watch things and analyze things, let alone sit and follow on, do things on social media. Trust me, it can get distracting too. Like I go on and I post stuff, I'll post links, and then I get off of it because otherwise, it's made to suck you in, right? So I do what I got to do for the show, and then I'll get off of it. I'll close the tabs out and get out because I don't want to sit there and waste endless amounts of time. Because I've caught myself starting to get sucked into it, so I know what you mean. It just eats up the whatever time you have. So, staying on the narrative that we were on in hour one, I want to stay on this vein of false flaggery for a second. Now, I know that you're a fan of Clancy, and I can see that the chat room is already on the same page with us. Because a couple people in the chat are mentioning Clancy. I've seen it mentioned a few times, so that means everybody's on the same page. I see almost like a sum of all fears type situation, where they hid the nuke. It was like a suitcase nuke, right?
Okay.
And they hid. If you ever get a chance to read the book, it was the book's a little bit more in depth. But if you want, if you need like the quick nutshell version, go watch the 2-hour movie that they made. It's Sum of All Fears. I know it's got Ben Affleck in it. I apologize beforehand for telling you to watch it just to do any research on it, because it's got him in it, whatever. Sometimes you have to do things that make you nauseous, but whatever. So although his acting is horrible, the movie gets the point across, or the visual reference of it was, and I can't remember if it was the CIA or somebody inside the government, which if I remember correctly, that's what it was. But they were trying to blame somebody else, and could have been the Russians if I remember correctly. But they hid this nuke inside of I think it was a vending machine at like a baseball stadium or whatever it was. And they lit it off, and then they blamed whoever they wanted to. That way they could start this war. So I could see the same type of situation happening, where you have that type of event happening here in the States, and then blaming whoever they want. I mean, they have ISIS now. I mean, ISIS is now an army, by the way. They've gotten so much military equipment. They ganked a couple weeks ago something like 150 howitzers. I mean, that's not a small amount of howitzers, but like not only the howitzers, but the shells for them and all the equipment to maintain them and everything else. Anything that we had given the Iraqi military, they and that they have taken. It's not, a lot of people are like, oh, they're just going to scavenge it, and they might not be. They might not have the military bearing of our military. Or other militaries, but if they're creating this state, I'm sure they're not just going to be a bunch of ragtag morons. They will have some semblance of conformity, or else they would be violating their own rules, and therefore they would probably have to behead themselves, right? So I mean, they will have some sort of structure. Now they've got all this equipment, including 150 howitzers. And like I was telling you during the break, the Pentagon, I just saw this the other day, and I think it was in the Washington Times. Yeah, it's the Washington Times. The title in the Washington Times is Pentagon Running Out of Time to Find Massive Missing Weapons in Afghanistan. The Pentagon can't account for 40% of the $626 million in weapons that they've given the Afghanistan security forces. They can't account for 40% of the $626 million in weapons. 40%, dude. 40%. It's almost half. And that's, I mean, I did the math. That's $250 million of weapons that they can't account for. Now, let me ask you, if you lost $250 million worth of anything, not even, mind you, weapons, right? I mean, they don't want you to have weapons here, but they don't bother to keep track of, we need to know exactly if you buy ammo, and we have to micro stamp it, and we have to put your fingerprint reader on the gun, because you can, it has to be, we know who's doing it and touching the gun. All means we need to GPS your gun, and I'm sure that's next, right? But over in Afghanistan, where there's quote-unquote bad guys that were actually fighting in firefights, hey, here's $250 million worth of weapons, and we don't get what you do with it. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is the level, again, to which the propaganda sinks, right? This is actually shoveled out there, and we're supposed to believe this. Again, one thing, before 9/11, remember, we were missing about $1 trillion of Pentagon money then, too. That all got overshadowed by 9/11. The idea of the weapons, though, where did they go? We're losing ground in Afghanistan. The Taliban is actually on a bigger resurgence than they've been since the invasion. And in Iraq and Syria, you have the Islamic State, as you mentioned, who are virtually an army now. And it's true that they don't have the capabilities, the military capabilities to actually have a functioning military army, which is why they are not feared from the point of view of the imperialist, of NATO and the Anglo-American establishment, essentially, because they know that once these people take power, as you said, they'll start beheading one another, right? So they're not going to mount a significant military resistance whenever it's time to march back in and give them orders. But, they may not have the paper trail, but trust me, they know where the weapons have gone. And they're probably being used to kill. They're probably being used to kill American service personnel and possibly American citizens in the future, and certainly being used to kill innocent people in the Middle East.
What about if they backdoored? See, this. I'm going to think like they do for a minute, okay? And knowing how the military works, let's say that they spend $626 million. Right, but they only actually needed for the Afghan military forces perhaps 50% of that, right? Maybe they only needed 60% of that. So they're able to take the other $250 million and funnel that towards perhaps other quote-unquote rebel groups, right? Because everybody's like, we're at the war. We're at war with the Taliban, and the Taliban attacked us on 9/11. No, actually, they didn't. We were good friends with them like 6 months before. They were shaking hands, and they were coming and visiting the White House, and pay that no mind. No, that's not important. It was Al Qaeda supposedly that attacked us, and I personally think that things like this, when they can't find the weapons. Yes, some of them could have gotten into some of the stuff could get into the hands. With no doubt, it gets into the hands of the Taliban. But it wouldn't surprise me if a large portion of that stuff if this was black op type stuff, so that they could behind the scenes, off the books, fund the rebels, the quote unquote rebels in Syria, or the ISIS, whatever you want to call them, and now they're in Iraq. To me, like, just letting them, not drone striking them in Iraq is that's backdoor arming them, because you're knowing, what was it, Dempsey was the one, well, it's hard for us to figure out, what's, civilian traffic and what's just a column of vehicles, it's not as easy as if we were invading. Really? Because I've seen pictures and footage of these guys driving for like miles through the Iraqi desert where it's nothing but a column of these vehicles with these guys with RPGs and machine guns sticking out the back and all this stolen equipment.
They could have just watched the Iraqi media.
Right? Like you don't seem to have a problem with drone striking civilians in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and at times in Iraq back in the day. Suddenly now you're worried about collateral damage? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, these weapons are being used for black ops, but even with with ISIS and the Syrian rebels, which are the same thing, by the way, you could put all different kinds of names on it, but they're essentially the same thing. So al-Nusra, again, has pledged. We claim that al-Nusra and ISIS are different, but al-Nusra declared allegiance to ISIS some time back and al-Qaeda. So it's all the same stuff, all the same ideology. We're arming all the same people. There are no moderate rebels in Syria. They do not exist. What passed for moderate rebels? I mean, what are you going to call these people? Moderate cannibals, right? Can you be a moderate cannibal? Once you engage in these types of atrocities, if you're considered moderate, I'm sorry, I'd hate to see what an extremist looked like.
I have a video on Federal Jack from, if you go under the Syria section, it's under World News. Just on if you look on the front page, it'll be under World News. And it says these are the moderate rebels, or no, I think it says woman hammers head. That's what it is. Woman hammers head, or as encourages son to stab a Syrian soldier, something like that. But it's under the World News category. It's right there. You can't miss it. And it's video from a Syrian girl, and she uploaded the video to her channel. And it's video from these guys. They're chanting. These are the Syrian moderate rebels. They have two captured Syrian army soldiers. Can't be more than maybe 19, 20 years old, young kids. The one kid's already dead because they've smashed his skull in, and the other one's laying. They force him down to his side. And this kid, who's like 10, maybe between 10 and 12 years old, they're encouraging him and screaming at him, go, do it. And he's stabbing the crap out of this kid in his chest. This kid's handcuffed, laying on his side. He can't do anything. And he's just standing there looking at this kid, and he's stabbing him. And you can see this kid's like, oh. And as he's getting stabbed, the mother is hammering him in the head with a hammer. I mean, like, wham, wham. This is a woman hammering this guy in the head, encouraging her child to stab the hell out of this guy. Okay? So I'm just saying, I'm not saying, well, all Muslims are bad, because some people have seen the video and said that. No, again, it's the programming that these people have been filled with. But this individual was a quote-unquote moderate Syrian rebel. And these were the moderate Syrian rebels. And here they have 19, 20-year-old kids who are bound and, with their hands bound behind their back, however it was, handcuffed or hog-tied, however it was, but they had their hands tied behind their back, and they were just hammering these kids' heads with hammers. And then they walk over to the other one, and the guy's got a camera, and he walks over, and he just hits the other one that's already laying there dead. Whack! Hits him in the head again. I mean, it's brutal stuff. Like, I've seen such horrific stuff, such horrific war crime footage over the years. All this stuff, by the way, is in the Reality of War section over on federaljack.com. If you have the balls to look at it for yourself, I encourage you to. That's why I have it up there, because the truth needs to be seen. So if you go up to the downloadable archive section, you'll see the Reality of War sections down towards the bottom. Scroll down, because there's each one of the images is a widget that if you click, it'll take you, or a button, that'll take you to the corresponding download page for each of those sections. So you scroll down, you'll see the one that says Reality of War. Click it, and you'll see war crime videos, ones that are titled Libyan war crimes. In fact, all the stuff that's under the Libyan war crime section was from the site Obama's Libya that kept getting hit by the IDF and everything else. And after a year of getting constantly hacked and everything else, they filed, the coup de grace was them filing false child porn charges against the website, and we had a fight with the internet service provider or the hosting company rather to get the server back. It took they investigated it and they realized it was crap. It was bogus lies, but they even said to us, perhaps the content that you're posting is drawing attention from people that don't want you to post that type of stuff. Like, they basically admitted that perhaps we pissed off people that we shouldn't have pissed off. But we called it Obama's Libya. It was up for a year. And all the videos that were on there and all the pictures, they're not lost. They're all in the download section. You can just go download it and look at them for yourself. So F the powers that shouldn't be when they try to, play these games and, we'll just censor it. You can't censor it. One of the videos that came out from Iraq in 2005, I made a video out of it. Like I took it and I did a little creative editing, not to the video itself, but like making it look like it's playing on an iPad, basically, to try to get past YouTube censorship so they can see it was done more for commentary and education and, just putting up propaganda videos. Because you never know with YouTube. They'll constantly shut things down and ban your channel for breathing in the wrong direction, right? So you got to learn how to play the game. And in that video, this guy, 2005, this Iraqi insurgent, they're talking about New World Order, Paul Wolfowitz, how 9/11 could have been done under false pretenses, basically to get us into Iraq and Afghanistan and New World Order and World Bank and all this other stuff. And Henry Kissinger, and you're like, what? That's why I titled it "Who Were We Fighting in Iraq?" If you haven't seen it, I'll send you a link to it, Brandon. It's one of those videos that you're like, what? And again, all this stuff's in the Reality of War section, ladies and gentlemen. Go download it. I mean, this is the horrific stuff that's going on. But back to the Syrian rebels, yes, you're right. These moderate rebels are not, man. They're anything but moderate. And then even if they are Syrians, you have these people that are, they've gone that next step. They've embraced the dark side, whatever that may be for them. And then you have mixed in with them to a large extent and running things, Al Qaeda. And people are saying, well, the Free Syrian Army, they're fighting with ISIS, and okay, look, you might have all this infighting, whatnot, but, every time we give weapons to the quote-unquote Free Syrian Army, I love when they guarantee, well, we can guarantee that the other groups won't get it. How are you going to guarantee that? You guaranteed that the Iraqi police and military their weapons wouldn't be turned over to Al Qaeda because, hey, we trained their guys for years, right? And they're good to go, right? Guess not.
Yeah, and again, the Free Syrian Army, from what I can tell, just simply doesn't exist anymore. You got the leaders of the Free Syrian Army, and again, this was not moderates; these were extremists themselves. But Salam Idris, I believe he might be in Qatar or one of these monarchies, one of these Gulf state monarchies. But you got two other guys in Europe. The command structure is gone, and so again, where are the moderates? This equipment and this aid is going directly to the jihadists, right? And people who want to make distinctions, right? We have Al Qaeda, Nusra, ISIS, all this stuff. It's really irrelevant. Again, you're right. It's infighting, but that's all it is. It's infighting because basically they're apes, right? These people are mental deficients. They can't get along with one another, even when they have a common goal, because they're extremists. And I'm not being just being insulting here. These people really are.
No, that's an analysis.
Mental problems.
But that's an analysis. Even the government has made that these guys really don't have any goal. Like, it's not like they're like, yes, we have political aims, and one day I'll be a senator in the Al Qaeda parliament. No, that's not. These guys are just they're fighters. They're like the most base level thinkers you could get, and that's what they're for. That's what Al Qaeda really is. I think that the full term is Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda Matlumat, I think, is the full term, which means the database. That's what in Arabic, that's the full way to say the database, and that's what Al Qaeda was. It was this database of fighters that could be used to cause chaos and mayhem and bring governments down. And ISIS. Oh, but we don't do that, Brandon. The government would never do that. They love me, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I think I'm free.
Yeah, and then ISIS is it's a direct descendant of Al Qaeda in Iraq. That's what it was called to begin with. Baghdadi was one of the leaders. Now Baghdadi is supposed to be the leader of ISIS. It became Al Qaeda in Iraq, then it became ISIL, and then ISIS, and now the Islamic State. Right? This is direct descendant of Al Qaeda. And as you pointed out, this was something that was created back in the late 70s openly by Brzezinski. And it was continued. I don't know why people would think that it would be any different on 9/11 or any different today. In fact, I just did an article recently. There was an interview with a guy named Nabil Naim. He was a former Al-Qaeda commander, right? And he did an interview with Al Madin, which is the Lebanese television agency, and he gave a really lengthy interview where he said that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are run by the CIA, and this guy would know about what he's talking about because he was in the higher the upper chains, and he's out and he's done with Al-Qaeda because he doesn't want to work for the CIA. It doesn't mean he's not an extremist. He just doesn't want to work for the CIA anymore. And this is not something that's really debatable. This is when you look at Al-Qaeda or ISIS, you are looking at the CIA's Arab Legion. That's what it is. It's a proxy army. It always has been, and it will continue to be. For people who look at this stuff and use it to hate Muslims, then maybe they would like to know that these groups, these Syrian rebels and the Libyan so-called rebels and so forth, they're killing Christians, they're killing Jews, they're also killing Muslims. They're killing Shia and Sunni Muslims, right? They're killing everybody, and they'd be surprised that most of the Muslims in the Middle East, the overwhelming majority of the Muslims in the Middle East, hate these people even more than Americans do because they have to live with them. And this was not something, for instance, in Syria that they had to live with. This extremist element.
We created radical Islam.
We did, and in fact, you can
the
go.
CIA
all the way back.
created it. Well, Brzezinski and all them, but not like the CIA had is a company and just pumps stuff out. But elements therein, and people like Brzezinski, it's a direct creation of the powers that shouldn't be, I should say, that stole our government. Right, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, you can even go back further and to Lawrence of Arabia, and this is what happened when the British took colonial control over Arabia, where they brought in these jihadis. Basically, they created a jihadi element in Arabia and used them to attack nationalistic elements who didn't want the British there. And this we also in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Muslim Brotherhood was created to combat the nationalistic elements like the Waft Party. The idea was that the Waft Party wanted the British out, so the British created the Muslim Brotherhood, who said, we don't care if the British come or go, we just want a caliphate. And they warred against each other. That's what the Muslim Brotherhood is today. That's something that was created by British intelligence, and it's still manipulated and controlled by British intelligence and American intelligence because there's no difference between the two, really. And that's what you have in operation in Syria and Egypt and of course Libya and all across the Middle East. So it's not just something that was created in the 70s. That was 100 years prior to the 70s when it was created. So this is not a new game at all.
No. That's why you see a lot of the playbook or the same things coming from the same playbook. It's they might be modified for whatever instance it's in, but it's the same type of crap. And again, looking back at the thing with the MH-17 in the Ukraine, amazing how fast they were to blame the Russians, who are they fill the bad guy meme in this story, right? This chapter of the live action play that we live every day is Russia's the bad guy, and they fit that villain meme. Well, amazing how Assad fit that villain meme, in the Syrian chapter, in the Syrian civil war chapter, right? When it was what was it, about 8 months ago, when they were ready to bomb Syria, we didn't have money to fix bridges or help sick veterans or anything else. But hey, we got like an extra couple $2 billion to go bomb another country. Why not? And the general public is pretty much what stopped that from happening, amazingly enough. And that serves to show you a few things, including the power of just opening your mouth. Anyway, I'm going to cut us off because the break is sneaking up. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. 3 short minutes. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment with my good friend Brandon Turbeville. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with me tonight. Like I said, when you come on, there are certain guys that come on that are friends of mine. When you guys come on, I don't consider it like, my guest tonight. I consider you guys more like guest co-hosts, especially if usually it's the people that are like that are only radio show hosts in their own right, and that's why I would consider you guys a guest co-host, because you already know radio, and you're on point with so much of this stuff, and you do your own show. So before we forget, I want you to plug all your stuff one more time, because I know we're going to get back into it and we're going to completely forget. So go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'm a regular writer for activistpost.com and an occasional writer for the antimedia.org, so check those websites out. And my own radio show is Truth on the Tracks, which is aired on ucy.tv every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, I cover a lot of different things on that show, current affairs. I go into historical stuff. I have guests on there occasionally as well. And I would encourage you to go to BrandonTurbeville.com. You have to type in the 3 W's, www.BrandonTurbeville.com. And that's the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the interviews that I do, all of the YouTube videos, the archive versions of my show, and you have links to my books there as well. So that's the hub of where I put all of my work. And, just check everything out there at BrandonTurbeville.com.
Awesome. I urge people to go check all your work out, listen to your radio show. Rip his archives. A lot of people, I don't have time to listen to it, blah, 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 if I'm working or whatever. So I don't expect you all to listen to my show live every night either. A lot of you don't. A lot of you listen on the archives on YouTube or federaljack.com or truthfrequencyradio.com, whatever. Same thing with Brandon. Go rip his archives and listen to him. If you have a YouTube downloader, just rip the YouTube version of it, and then you can turn it to an MP3 for whenever you want it. Or if there's an available option to rip the MP3, do that. Keep it. I tell everybody all the time. You should, whatever your favorite radio show hosts are, especially now, storage is very cheap. Just get newer cars have USB thumb drives. Get like a 16 or a 32 gig thumb drive and load it up with all your favorite radio shows. And you can, load it up for the week and then go listen to you load them up maybe per night, or maybe, every week you go and load it up with the previous week's shows and everything, whatever. There's many ways to do it. You could put it on MP3 players. You could burn them as CDs. There's a ton of stuff that you can do now to get the information, into your vehicle or into your your phone to listen to at work, on your way to work, while you work, doing whatever. So I urge you to rip his show, rip my show, go to Truth Frequency, take all the other shows that are over there that Chris gives you I think it's the first week or 2 weeks. I think it's 7 days. The low quality ones are for free. So go rip the older, the shows from your favorite hosts. And, if they have, most of the hosts have their own spot where they host their archives as well. Go rip all that stuff, because this stuff's important. I don't expect you guys to listen to any of these shows right off the bat, too. Sometimes I know people listen to the shows a month later and be like, that was a great show. I mean, I still listen to Bill Cooper shows that he did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, if not more. I listen to stuff from Mae Brussel from 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So, this stuff will always be important. It's like an archive. So go rip it and spread it around. Anyway, Brandon, we were talking about Gaza and Israel and just all of this madness, too, during the break. We were chatting about a bunch of different things, and I know we're low on time here because this is the final segment. I want to ask you your opinion about, the madness that's going on over there. And what's your take on it? I mean, the government over there, Bibi Netanyahu and them, they've really propagandized a lot of the Israelis into believing that what they're doing is right. And, again, they're just the people themselves. The citizens are just like the citizens here. They're programmed through propaganda through the ages, just like we are. But I worry that the government over there, the regime, whatever you want to call it, they're really, they're not really Jews. These people are really Satanists, just like the same Satanist evil scum that, control our government. I mean, in Tel Aviv, they have a Rothschild Boulevard. Need I say more? We all know the Rothschilds are evil, pedophilic, Satan worshipping. And I'm not talking about Lucifer. Lucifer means the light. I'm talking about like whatever Satan is and whatever evil force that is. They worship that, right? They do horrific things. So these people are the same people that are in charge over there. So obviously, the very same people at the very tippy top aren't. They they use this. See, this whole thing in the Middle East to me is this clash of politics and religion coming head to head. You know, the two subjects you're not supposed to talk about. And you have these two things that are coming literally head to head, and they're clashing. And maybe for a lot of Americans, they can understand that because we have the supposed separation of church and state. But it's much different over there, and that's one of the biggest problems. Is it's this clash between politics and religion. And often you'll see people falling back on religion as an excuse on either side. To excuse whatever their actions may be, and in reality, a lot of this has to do with politics. I mean, I know some of it has to do with religious beliefs, but I mean, I think the whole thing of God gave us the land, blah 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 blah. I think this is all stupid. Personally, I think that the land belongs to the people that were there. It was taken from the Palestinians, and I can understand why they're pissed off because they feel like they've been occupied since the 40s, which technically they have been. So I can understand why they're angry. Just working out something with them. I mean, everybody that thinks that if you want to work with the Palestinians, then they want to wipe the Jews out. No, they realize that they by now Israel's been there for so long that they kind of, I don't think that they'd even want them to leave because it would create this weird they would create a vacuum of some sort in many different ways, politically, even economically, the land itself. So it would just create a lot of problems. So I think and you can see they're willing to work on a two-state solution, but the problem is you have this group that runs Israel that they don't want that. I mean, part of the ceasefire thing that Hamas had just was willing to go through that Israel said, no, we won't agree to it, was a 10-year ceasefire. And Israel said, no, we won't agree to that. And Hamas, maybe they only said that because they knew Israel wouldn't agree to it, but part of the reason is because the arms industry in Israel is just like the arms industry here, the military industrial complex, and they rely on this cycle of 18 to 24 months of attacking Gaza, every 18 to 24 months. So if there was a ceasefire for 10 years, how much money wouldn't be made by these scumbags that that either put some of these politicians in power or are politicians themselves, like Dick Cheney was with Halliburton. So, I mean, it's multifaceted when you look at it. It's just greed, and then you also have to take into consideration that there's a large percentage of these people, the powers that shouldn't be over there in Israel and the government, that want to wipe Palestine completely from the map. And they've got people to think like that in the country themselves. They've got people to think in that fascist tone of they literally just raise Gaza and, whatever's left of Palestine, from the map and then, let it all be Israel. I mean, that's horrific thinking. That's the same type of thinking that the Nazis wanted to do to the Jews, technically, like erase the Jews, right? Isn't that what they always say? Well, then you guys are engaging in the very same type of fascist type of behavior, and dehuman. I guess dehuman be the wrong word. Whatever, unhuman behavior. It's just disgusting. But it's multifaceted. So, what's your take on the whole situation with Gaza and Palestine and Israel?
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean, you have. It is complex, but I think one thing is clear is that the Israelis are the offending party here. Hamas is, interesting about Hamas is that Hamas is sort of the best of a really bad situation for most Palestinians. Hamas doesn't really represent the outlook of most Palestinians. Hamas is, it is a fundamentalist organization, but it arose out of a vacuum of, sort of a lack of leadership from the Palestinian government. And it just recently broke off from Fatah, and I know they're coming back together now, but it looks like that is largely going to be scuttled. But the idea is that, before the Israelis had their state set up, there were 30% Christians in Palestine. And now there's 3%. And the reason why, 3%, the reason why Hamas, for instance, a sort of Islamic fundamentalist organization, would have so much sway is that most of the Christians and Jews are gone from those areas because either the Israelis killed them or they just simply ran them out. And, that's something that I think the Christian Zionists over here would be very interested in taking a look at and seeing what the Israelis think of Christians, and actually what the Israelis think of non-Israeli Jews. Jews who aren't of the right bloodline, Jews who lived in Palestine with Muslims and Christians for many, many years in relative harmony until the Israelis got their state set up. And now these indigenous Jews get treated like dogs. I'd really like to see the reaction of a lot of these Christian Zionists if they could see the pictures of what the Israelis did to the churches, where they spray painted "Jesus is a monkey" on the churches. But I guess John Hagee didn't tell them that, and I guess their $1 million televangelist didn't tell them that. Of course, they wouldn't. But personally, I'm not in favor of a two-state solution. I'm in favor of a one-state solution, and I think that the two are just going to have to, some people, some Israelis are just going to have to get out. Some settlers are just going to have to leave. But it's not fair for people who grew up there. I mean, we've gone so long now to the point where there are people who were born in Israel and live there, right? They're Israelis, they're Palestinians. So I'm personally in favor of a one-state solution with equal rights for all. But that's considering the way the situation is taking place now. There might not be any Palestinians left to have to worry about. And this is, of course, the ultimate goal, is to wipe these people off the face of the map. And this is not a retaliation by Israel. This is not simply an offensive operation by Israel. This is an attempt at an extermination. And it's been an extermination that's been initiated since 1948. And I think, again, I keep referring to the Christian Zionists here because they're really the ones that are so stalwart in this support for Israel. And they might be surprised as to how the Zionist ideology didn't exist in Christianity until the late 1800s. This was something foreign to Christianity. This idea of a Jewish home, a right of return, garbage, didn't exist in Christianity until then. And there was a push by British intelligence and big bankers to create Zionism, Christian Zionism, in the late 1800s. And it grew and grew until what we have today, which is a very minute resemblance to Christians of yesteryear. I mean, the Christians of 2014 don't even resemble the Christians of 1950. So we have this agenda, this narrative, this ideology that was created in a relatively recent period of time that was, sort of injected into the Christian religion.
And it's a political ideology. It's not even like a religious thing, because a lot of people are like, well, if you say Zionism, you mean Jew. No, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, and you don't have to be a Zionist to be a Jew. Joe Biden's not Jewish, and he's a proud Zionist. He's even said it. Go look up on YouTube, Joe Biden, I'm a Zionist. The video will pop up. There's probably 5 or 6 versions of it that'll pop up, and you'll see Joe Biden, hey, I'm a Zionist. Okay, it's a political ideology. It has nothing to do with religion. And you were talking about them wanting to wipe them off the planet, them being some of the powers that shouldn't be, these people that have pushed this agenda, these Zionists over, and anybody that follows that ideology over in Israel. I read an article online the other day from The Independent from a lady who wrote it, and she's a dual Israeli citizen, and her name is Mira Bar Hillel, and the title of the article is "Why I'm on the Brink of Burning My Israeli Passport," and she talks about this young Israeli parliamentarian member of the Knesset, and about some of the stuff that she's posted on Facebook and said, and blah 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 blah. And one of the things that this woman wrote a week before that the Palestinian kid was kidnapped and burned alive, a week before, she wrote on Facebook, quote, "This is not a war against terror, and not a war against extremists, and not even a war against the Palestinian Authority. The reality is that this is a war between two people. Who is the enemy? The Palestinian people. Why? Ask them. They started it." End quote. So, I mean, she says it. This is a member of the Knesset That would be like one of our senators going up or congressmen going up on Facebook or Twitter and saying the same thing. We're not, take it out of Palestinians and say that it's us versus the Iraqis. Let's put it in the context of the Iraq War, right? And say it's one of these, quote unquote right wingers, and replace Palestinians with Iraqi. And replace the Israeli parliamentarian, the member of the Knesset, to replace them with a senator or a congressman. Would there be outrage here in America? Would people be like, "My God, that's the most"? Like, you just openly admitted this isn't even a war on terror. This is just about wiping certain people off the planet. There would be outrage. Here you have a member of the Knesset outright admitting it's not a war against terror, which they say, oh, the terrorists, right? No, it's not about terror. She says, again, this is not a war against terror and not a war against extremists and not even a war against the Palestinian Authority. The reality is this is a war between two people. I mean, she said it, but I couldn't, you know what I mean? I couldn't have given you any better of a piece of evidence than their own verbiage. So, and again, this isn't the Jews, because, this is ridiculous. There was harmony before these hardcore Zionist idiots came into power. And these are the people that are responsible. Look, there are some very intelligent people out there. I've played the audio of Holocaust survivors denouncing what's going on, former IDF soldiers, and everybody said pretty much the same thing, that anybody that when they speak about Zionism and what it is, and they say that Zionism is giving for lack of a better expression, it's giving Jews a bad name. I mean, it's harming everybody because there's this collective anger growing at Jews in general because of the actions of Israel and the Zionists that are in control of that government right now. Because Israel is, let's look at it as the state of Israel. It's a government, right, with weapons, and the people that are at the control of that government are these Zionists, and they're giving anybody that practices Judaism a bad name. Like, my grandmother certainly wasn't part of the New World Order agenda. She certainly didn't want to bomb and kill Palestinians and want to see innocent children die. She would be rolling over in her grave, if she's cremated, but she's technically rolling in her grave right now, I can guarantee you. And if she were alive, she would be appalled, and so would my mother, at what's going on over there. I mean, I was raised Christian myself, but my grandmother was Jewish. She survived, where she was a practicing Jew. She survived the prison camps of World War II, and she would be appalled at what's going on in her name when they say never again, Hitler to Hamas. No, what the IDF and what the government of Israel is doing is closer to what Hitler and the Nazis did than anything else. And it's just, I'm not on the, people say, you're on the side of Hamas. No, that's a logical fallacy too, okay? That's a ridiculous statement. I'm not taking anybody's side. I'm on the side of humanity. We're killing innocent people. And to the people that support Israel, why are we sending these young Israeli men and women to go get shot and killed, and just like we send our armed forces to go get shot and killed? For what? So they could build another apartment complex and put settlers in it and pave a Jewish-only street? Really? It's just, I mean, first of all, nothing for nothing, but Brandon, wouldn't you think that if I was in charge, if I was in the Israeli government, I wouldn't want to be making angry all of the neighbors that surround me that have armies and that have weapons and, perhaps want to kill me. I would try to make friends with everybody. If I would keep up my defenses, but I wouldn't just go around swinging my balls in their face, so to speak, and saying, well, I'll bomb you, I'll invade you, I'll kill you. You can't do that. Of course you're going to build resentment. And the whole situation, I mean, the country, the way it was built to begin with, and the way it was, brought into existence, go look at the bombing of the King David Hotel, and who actually did that. That was the Zionists posing as, because Israel wasn't official yet, but that was Zionists, Irgun terrorists posing as Palestinians. as Arabs, and another false flag event, pretending to be, blaming the Arabs for something that, of the area for something that they didn't do. There were British citizens killed. I believe there might even been American citizens killed, if I remember correctly. But just look up the bombing of the King David Hotel. In fact, Israel openly admits to it now. They just gave a medal to one of the last surviving guys a couple years ago. I don't know if he's still alive or if he died by now, but you could look it up. They gave one of the guys a medal a couple years ago. So, I'm not, my grandmother was Jewish, right? So that means technically by Jewish right, my mother was a Jewish woman, and because I was born to my mother, I'm a Jewish, I have, Jewish blood in my veins, I guess you could say. I was raised Christian. I never went to temple or any of that, or read the Torah or anything like that, but whatever, I was exposed to both religions, but I understand that I don't subscribe to any mainstream religion. I have my own views on what the creative force is and everything. But I see what this is. This is a bashing of politics and religion coming head to head. And because they're both contentious issues, I see that, that people get very emotional about both of them, and the people that are controlling things understand this, and they tweak people's emotions purposely to keep this going. I think at a base level, I think if we put both religion and politics aside, we can understand that killing each other is stupid. Killing each other over sand is even stupider. Killing each other over a piece of sand because someone's supposed imaginary friend gave it to them is the most stupid thing ever. There's more than enough land on this planet for everybody. And the fact that we allow this slaughter to continue goes to show that we're apathetic, we're ignorant, society needs to pull its head out of its rear end, and it's absolutely disgusting. And I'm tired of what my grandmother and all those other people that weren't Jews, but the political prisoners, the Czechs, the Poles, everybody else, the 22 million, and they say 6 million, how about 22 million in the camps total, right? All those people went through. Okay, the horrific things that happened during World War II all over the place. Like, when is humanity going to learn? When? When are we going to pull our heads out of our rears? We got a few minutes left. We got about 3 minutes left. Brandon, your final thoughts. Go ahead. When will humanity learn, brother?
Well, that's a hard question to ask because we've had a lot of history and they don't seem to have learned anything yet. But I do want to kind of go on the record here and say that I agree with you. We got to make a distinction when we talk about Zionism. Make that distinction from. God, I'm getting tongue-tied here, but making sure that people understand that when we say Zionism, we don't mean Jews. Again, I pointed out the way real Jews are treated in Israel is absolutely disgusting. In fact, a lot of Israelis are actually standing up and opposing what's happening to the Palestinians and refusing to join in on that and refusing to join the military.
There's a lot of reservists that are refusing to report for active duty.
And they're going to jail.
Yep.
They're going to jail for it. And that's not going to be a pleasant stay.
No, because they're going to get beaten and treated as traitors.
Yeah, so and those people are heroes and commendable because they were born in Israel. It's the only home they've ever known, and they're willing to stand up to their government and their peer pressure and their peer group and say no on a moral basis. So I admire them for that. But as far as will humanity ever learn? I guess as I say to people, I have high hopes, but I don't have high expectations. And I think when you look around at the situation across the world, or even here in the United States, we have the potential to turn it around anytime that we want to, as a people, want to turn it around. But will we do it? I'm not so sure. So. I had to leave on that neutral note, but the potential is there, but we haven't really shown any sign of living up to it.
Well, understanding, everything I know, from occulted knowledge all the way to quantum physics and everything in between, my analysis is that, yeah, we can do it. We just have to apply ourselves, and that's what you see. I mean, that's why you see more and more people waking up. I know it seems slow, but I have faith that we're going to get there. That's why I constantly remind people that, we need to wake up. Humanity needs to get up and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to learn from my mistakes, and we're not going to do them anymore. Like Kennedy said, an error only becomes a mistake when we refuse to correct it. So let's correct our mistakes. Let's correct our errors so they don't become mistakes. I mean, it's not that hard to learn, right? When we're kids, we touch something hot and go, ouch, hot, burn, no feel good. Don't do that again. Brain puts that together real fast. Let's do that with everything else around us, and maybe we'll stop treating each other like animals. Maybe we can evolve. That would be awesome. Brandon, we are out of time, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to check his radio show out. Check him out. Go to his website, BrandonTurbeville.com. He's smart, insightful, and he's always got his finger on the pulse of what's going on. Go check his stuff out over on Activist Post, too. You show him some love over there as well. Give him some tweets and some Facebook likes and stuff. Anyway, we are out of time. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. Stay frosty. The solutions to our problems are most definitely an inside job. As I tell you all the time, you guys are the heroes that you've been looking for your entire lives. So look to yourself and you will find that hero within you. We're out of here.